Gotham Knights is a single-player co-op action-adventure game starring Bat's supporting cast, Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, and Red Hood, where you can choose to play as your favourite hero from the Bat Crew, or all four of them. The main drive for this game is that Batman's death leaves the team to pick up the pieces and step up to become the heroes that Gotham needs. If you like any of the latest iterations of Assassin's Creed games, be it Origins, Odyssey, or Valhalla, you're gonna like Gotham Knights. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Gotham Knights feels like an Ubisoft game. Without your typical Ubisoft bullshit, single-player cash shop. It's got a real good narrative story, which is an absolute treat to play through, but in between the rich story, you have a disjointed world that is repetitive and grindy, and unlike the AC games, doesn't really have a change of scenery. But again, that's exactly what AC fans like myself really enjoy. Gotham Knights is one of those modern games that tries to dip its fingers in too many pies all at once. It feels like the game had multiple directions and paths, and rather than pick a single one, the team at Warner Bros. Montreal couldn't decide if they wanted to make a single-player narrative-driven game, an open-world adventure game, or a live service game. They managed to create a captivating story that made you deeply involve yourself in the personal struggles and team dynamic of the Bat Crew, all while making some pretty lackluster open-world activities that probably would have been more engaging and enjoyable had they been given a little more love and attention prior to the launch of the game. But the biggest thing for me is just how similar this felt to Marvel Avengers. In fact, I think SkillUp, in his review of Gotham Knights, managed to sum it up perfectly.
And as I was playing this, I was like, what's going on here? Something's weird about this. Its structure doesn't work, its gear system is terrible. What are all these weird currencies I'm collecting? So much of this seems like the stuff you'd put into a live service game, but it's not. It's not a live service game. It doesn't have any in-game spending. So what's the deal? Now, I'm not one for conspiracies, but I wonder if the flop of Marvel's Avengers forced a hard pivot in the way that this game was being designed, because many of its elements feel like leftovers from a live service model. The health of enemies, the gear rarity and stat system, the mountains of currencies I'm collecting, the open world grind, the customization options like skins and color palettes.
As someone who used to make content on Marvel Avengers, I agree with absolutely everything that SkillUp has to say. It just makes too much sense, given that Warner Bros. Past missteps in trying to play catch up with Marvel. It feels like they heard the announcement of the Marvel Avengers live service game and realized they had to play catch up yet again, only for the Marvel game to flop and them to be left with the foundations of a live service game and then decide to turn it into the non-live service monstrosity that it is now. I guess it was the less riskier option, so that's probably why they chose to do it. With all of that out of the way, let's get into the performance stuff, because who doesn't like the performance stuff first? Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Frame rates. If you've watched any other review, you've probably heard people rave about the lack of consistency and lack of overall frames you'll get while playing this game. So I won't harp on too much about this, as it's all been said before, but the fact that it's locked at 30 FPS on latest consoles and struggles to maintain it, all while having poor optimization on PC, is quite unfortunate. I played this game on PS5 and it really struggled. When traveling through the open world, even on foot, my frame rates often dropped below the 30 mark, but not often enough to make the game unplayable, just often enough to break the immersion every time. It did, however, stay reasonably solid in combat sequences, and the other redeeming factor was that in the side missions that take place in instances that are extremely linear levels, the frame rate didn't drop below 30 the entire time. If frame rate is really important to you, I'd recommend holding off until the game is optimized a little more, or go and buy a 40 series. So it looks like you might be waiting a bit longer. The other thing that a lot of people didn't like about this game is the open world design. The fact that the game looks kind of bland and doesn't feel distinctive as a playable city. The fact that no areas on the map were really memorable. And I'd have to partly agree. While you do travel to locations multiple times in the playthrough, nothing really makes you stop and take in the sights. You're never left saying, wow. It feels all very samey and forgettable, but I think that's what actually makes this iteration of Gotham so distinct. It feels like a normal city. Well, as normal as Gotham City can feel. It feels realistic. Nothing is beautiful about this city. It's just a city full of crime and corruption. The perfect setting for this tale of justice and crime fighting. Maybe it's just me, but I don't see the lack of spectacle in the world as a bad thing at all. Its charm is in its blandness. The visuals aren't the only issue people have with the open world design, but rather the traversal of it. Unfortunately, Gotham Knights locks its best traversal mechanics behind challenges for each character, which isn't too much of a problem unless you're someone like me, who didn't even know it existed in the game until about the second last story mission. I only discovered it because I felt the game was coming to an end and decided to do some cleaning up of the content that I'd missed. Hence, I only unlocked Batgirl's gliding mechanic with 2 story missions to go. Yup. I had practically beaten the game without Batgirl's core traversal mechanic. It might not sound impressive, but if you play this game, you'll soon realize how difficult it can be at times to traverse the environment. The grapple that's available to each of our heroes is as consistent as my upload schedule. Yeah, it's not consistent in the slightest. It'll constantly lock onto things you don't want it to, or not lock onto something you're obviously aiming right at and know that the grapple can reach. It just feels like I'm rolling the dice every time I'm trying to move through the world. Will the grapple work or will it not? Which doesn't make it for a very enjoyable experience. On the other hand, the bat cycle is, well, really fun, and I might be the only one to think so. But the world wasn't designed in a way where you can use it to its full potential. The best part was sliding around on the bat bike, but often it was just used to close a large distance of traveling over a bridge between districts in which you're driving in a straight line. I'm not even going to talk about the fast travel mechanic. Just think Ubisoft control towers, except once you've climbed up to the top, now you have to wait 30 seconds before you can actually unlock the map. Overall, I think if they made the grapple feel more consistent and they made more use of the bat cycle and made it clear that each character can unlock more traversal mechanics earlier in the game, traversing through Gotham would have been an absolute blast. Possibly the biggest issue that people have with this game is the pure repetitiveness of the open world activities. There are a range of activities from stopping a heist to stopping a break-in or chasing after criminals on the cycle. It really just is a reason to go to a location and fight a bunch of enemies. Which for some is enough, but it can be pretty boring once you've done this a few nights in a row and all the enemies are still the same. There's 1 or 2 activities that break up the formula, such as the crime scene investigation. But this is really just a reading game, where you have to find the detail that leads to the criminal, then go stop them. It's a cool idea, just not executed in the best way. Another big issue with the activities is that they're all pretty much the same activities copied and pasted throughout the world. I'm not talking about minor changes in location. These missions always take place in the same locations. Sure, you're not going to get them every single night, but I can guarantee you through the duration of your playthrough, you're going to have repeated a few of them about 3 or 4 times in the exact same location and layout. I'm not asking for them to be dramatically different, but a lot of these missions could be randomized locations across Gotham City to at least spice up the feeling of it being a different activity in a different location across Gotham. The combat is where a lot of people either enjoy this game or really dislike this game. A lot of issues people had, myself included, is that the game often threw too many enemies at you all at once. It felt like a chore defeating 10 or 15 goons all trying to break into one random apartment building. Like for real, why are 15 people trying to break into a random building? If you pair this with the ridiculous amount of health that some of them have, you have a recipe for a combat system that feels more like a grind than actual fun. It makes me wonder if the enemies had more health because the game is technically a co-op game, but surely the health and numbers of enemies scale to the number of members in the party. If you're like me and you do all the side activities before then doing the main story and side quests, you get pretty strong, to the point where in these side missions and main story missions, the game feels balanced. Enemies don't take minutes to kill, and you get that feeling, the true power fantasy of actually being one of the 4 beloved heroes. I also love the diverse range of abilities and playstyles of each member in the back crew. They all felt distinct to play and have diverse abilities for all situations. The way these abilities work is you build up a sort of combo bar, then can use the abilities from your ability wheel, for a lack of a better term. Fairly straightforward. It would have been nice to tie these into the actual combos of each character, but I can't complain because these all felt pretty nice to use. The combat is also heavily impacted by the type of enemies you're facing off against. There are a few enemies that are just a pain to have to fight, giving the small window of opportunity to hit them, and the fact that you're often fighting multiple of them all at once, it can get a little frustrating. So if combat is something you enjoy, this game is probably going to be a 50-50 for you. If it clicks and you like it, it's a fabulous system. But at the same time, there are a lot of things hindering this system. Overall, the combat's just a mixed bag. The story is compelling and is really the main motivation for finishing the game, at least for me. I was able to get invested in the back crew and their internal struggles with each other and themselves, each trying to see what role they play following Batman's passing. The story's mystery unfolds exceptionally well, and you don't feel cheated out of any conclusion drawn. It's just a solid story and one of the game's strong suits. To top it off, the side quests to take down some of Gotham's iconic villains is also by far the best part of the story, at least for me. These linear missions were a blast to play through, and to see how each reacted to the passing of Batman was truly enjoyable. You get to see the motives behind their actions as they believe with the Bat dead, they can get away with anything. So it felt ever so sweet to put them back behind bars. The story is a reason enough to play this game, but if you're not somebody that really gets invested in stories, I'd probably steer away from it. The item system feels pretty much like it was ripped out of Marvel Avengers game, which is probably why Skill Up and myself reached the same conclusion, that this game was meant to compete with Marvel Avengers. That is, until it flopped. Nevertheless, the systems remain and feel kinda pointless. If you're playing through the game normally, you'll acquire enough materials to never have to worry about crafting. You'll always have enough resources, so it makes me wonder why they bothered to keep these in the game at all. But at the same time, the crafting system mods and stats help you to add an extra layer to the combat system by allowing you to create builds and plan ahead for tackling certain missions. For example, if you're about to start a Mr. Freeze mission, you could tailor your armor to have frost resistance and give your weapons a fire elemental effect. It's by no means a complex system, by no means crucial to completing the game, but it does add an extra layer for the players seeking a little more depth or a little more of a role-playing experience from the game. It's something that I personally think helps to enhance the experience, but I can see why for some players it just feels like it's tacked on and isn't really needed at all. Overall, I think Gotham Knights is as average as an average game could be. Given all of its flaws, its poor performance, a lackluster open world, and repetitive activity systems, there is a really enjoyable experience to be had here. If you can become invested in the great narrative experience, solid combat system, and an extra depth that the crafting and mod system add to the game. This by no means is a must-play title, but is most certainly a game worthy of your time. If any of this interests you, especially if you're a DC fan, it's not a game worth missing. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and leave a comment down below. I know it's been a little while, but I felt a need to take a break, and there weren't many titles releasing that I was too interested in reviewing. But hopefully I'll be back with slightly more regular uploads. Catch you in the next one.